Welcome to a new explainer. Usually, me, I'm here with a ton of enthusiasm, breaking down fascinating new tech or historical oddities. But today is different. We're stepping away from all that to conduct a strict, chronological breakdown of an anomalous event. The city archives literally just classify it as the 3:17 a.m. incident. So I'm going to ask you to maintain your objectivity here, because the data we're about to look at, it fundamentally breaks our understanding of physics, biology, and, well, basic safety. Let's just look at the timeline of how this whole thing began. The entire sequence kicked off at exactly 3:17 a.m. And honestly, the synchronicity alone is the first major anomaly. Across the entire grid, every single mobile device powered on simultaneously. And when the reports say every, they mean it. The source material emphasizes this deeply unsettling detail. Even phones with completely dead batteries, or phones that literally had their power sources physically removed, turned on. The screens bypassed all operating systems, all security protocols, and just went pitch black. Then, a single text message popped up for everyone. Do not look out the window. No sender, no way to swipe it away or delete the notification, just an absolute total digital hijack. Okay, let's dive into this and look at the immediate public reaction. At first, human psychology did exactly what you'd expect. When we face something totally inexplicable, we try to laugh it off, right? The expectation was that this was just some massive hacker prank, maybe a viral marketing stunt. People were laughing, recording videos for their feeds, discussing it online. But the reality caught on street surveillance cameras was just horrific. A young woman in a high-rise was the first recorded person to actually ignore that warning. The camera caught her walking right up to the glass, looking outside, and then freezing, completely paralyzed. After a few seconds of just absolute rigidity, she started slamming her head against the glass. I mean, with violent, inhuman force. Over and over. She didn't stop until the entire window was painted red. This was absolutely no viral prank. We're looking at a physiological trigger of completely unknown origin. Looking at this timeline, you really start to see the terrifying, systematic nature of the anomaly. This wasn't just chaos, it was a highly calculated escalation. At the 1-minute mark, total digital control over all devices. By minute 5, those first physical contacts happened through visual perception, leading to the initial victims. Then, at the 15-minute mark, complete isolation. The internet, cellular networks, everything just went down entirely. The city was totally cut off from the outside world, meaning nobody could warn anyone else. And finally, at 30 minutes, the physical infrastructure started collapsing. City lights began to flicker and dim. That entire preparatory phase, it took less than an hour. Less than an hour to leave millions of people trapped in the dark. It was exactly at this moment, as the city plunged into this kind of flickering twilight, that surviving witnesses started identifying the cause. The official records classify them simply as the silhouettes. From a purely objective standpoint, the data describes unidentified entities characterized by extreme, unnatural height and disproportionately long arms. But the absolutely crucial detail here is their spatial positioning. They weren't roaming the streets. They manifested exclusively in the windows of opposite buildings. Meaning, to even see one, a victim had to be looking out of their own apartment, directly into the glass across the street. They just emerged out of nowhere, perfectly synchronized with the failing lights. And this brilliantly illustrates the incredibly cruel mechanics of this threat. It relied on a basic biological rule that made escape almost impossible for us. Think about it. Step 1. You look out the window and notice a tall silhouette in the distance. But the human eye needs moisture, right? Sooner or later, you literally have to blink. That's step 2. And the very microsecond you do, the instant that visual contact is broken, step 3 kicks in. The entity instantly closes the distance. Every single time you blink, this unnaturally tall nightmare skips forward. Towards your building, towards your floor, towards your glass. It was an unavoidable countdown tied directly to your own involuntary bodily functions. By morning, this massive percentage represents the portion of the city's population that had completely vanished. 50%. Exactly half the city. Hundreds of thousands of people simply evaporated overnight. And frankly, this isn't the statistic of a natural disaster. This is the metric of a systematic, methodical sweep that took place in absolute horrific silence, all while the other half of the city hid in sheer terror. When law enforcement began their investigations the next morning, opening up the apartments of the missing, the forensic evidence was chilling. First, absolute emptiness. No bodies, no survivors. Second, a complete lack of forced entry. Doors were heavily deadbolted from the inside, but the most disturbing data by far came from the bedrooms. Puddles and wet footprints, specifically of bare feet, were found standing right beside the beds of the missing. Judging by the volume of water pooled on the floor, something stood over these sleeping people for an extended period, just watching them. And from those beds, distinct, wet drag marks led away, trailing straight into the darkest corners of the rooms or hallways, where they just abruptly ended. Nothingness. To understand exactly how physical contact was made, we have to look at the final recorded encounter of the night. The sources call it the 18th floor incident. Now, this subject acted with intense, rational paranoia. He took extreme precautions. He heavily taped all his windows with opaque material, manually powered down his phone, armed himself with a kitchen knife, and just sat dead center in his living room. He made the completely logical decision to simply wait out the night in total silence and darkness. No mistakes, absolutely no looking outside. But that perfect defense fell apart when the total silence was broken by a sound. The survivor reported hearing a distinct, slow tap, tap, tap. Instinctively, you'd expect a threat to come from the hallway, right? The front door. But the sound wasn't coming from there. The knocking was on the glass, from the outside. And here we hit a terrifying spatial paradox. This apartment was on the 18th floor. We're talking dozens of meters above the ground, no balconies, no fire escapes. Hearing the sound of knuckles knocking on the outside of the glass at that extreme height is physically impossible. Unless whatever is making the sound is somehow suspended in thin air. The subject just couldn't take the suspense. He slowly approached the window and peeled back just the very edge of the tape. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that what he saw completely defies logic. The entity wasn't falling, it was hanging directly outside the building, suspended right at the height of the 18th floor, just holding onto the masonry with those disproportionately long, wet arms. The forensic data describes its appearance with terrifying clarity. Absolutely smooth skin, no eyes, no nose. Actually, there was no face to speak of at all, except for one hyper-exaggerated feature. A massive, unnaturally wide smile stretching from ear to ear. And as the subject stared in utter horror, the entity slowly raised its wet hand and pressed a single, extraordinarily long finger right against the glass. And in that precise moment, the final act of the anomaly took place. The survivor's phone, the one that had been manually powered down and tossed across the room, suddenly lit up with this blinding white light. A new, personalized notification flashed on the screen. Just 3 words. She found you. The report notes that immediately after the subject read the message, the power in the entire apartment completely failed and all contact was lost forever. So this explainer leaves us with a pretty serious question to ponder. If these entities can control our electronics, manipulate our biology, and completely bypass all physical boundaries, are we actually safe in our own homes? Or are our windows really just doors that we forgot to lock? Thank you for joining me for this breakdown. And seriously, be very careful about what's happening just beyond your glass tonight.